Hello there, welcome to Boxpred. These are my post-fight thoughts on a big weekend of boxing that's just happened. So let's take a look at some of the fights that we've just recently witnessed. First of all, I'll start here in the UK on the domestic scene. Just to mention, there was a British super bantamweight title fight, which is the same weight division as the fight that happened later on over in San Antonio between Nonito Donaire and Wilfredo Vasquez Jr. So you can sort of have a look at the two and sort of compare, domestic scene with world class, and then you can actually see what these guys are trying to live up to and trying to build towards. And the guy in this case trying to build towards that is a guy by the name of Scott Quigg, and he got a TKO victory in the 8th round over Jamie Arthur, a domestic fighter here in the UK, and he's no slouch, and he actually had some success early on and was making a good fight of it. He actually had Scott Quigg down in the 4th round, caught him with a lovely shot in exchange, and that was it was looking like Quigg was in big trouble. He was hurt. However, as the fight went on, I think the quality showed and class showed. And Scott Quigg was clearly advancing. He was getting on top. He was pressurising Arthur up against the ropes, and he was using a good range of punches. And I like what I saw. It was just a build-up over the fight. And normally, as the fight goes on, you do tend to see the better boxer start coming out on top, start putting pressure on his opponent. And in this case, Jamie Arthur was stopped. The TKO was quite strange, actually. I mean, Scott Quigg hit Jamie Arthur with a good, I think it was sort of a kidney area, a really powerful shot. And Jamie Arthur sort of like spun round in sort of like, it looked like pain or something. And the ref just stopped it. I mean, Arthur seemed to sort of be still in the fight. He would have fought on by the look of it. But I think, a bit of a premature stoppage. However, I think it was only going to go one way. Even if it had gone the distance, I think Scott Quigg would have won the fight. I think he was just coming on to be, after there was that early sort of scare, I think he started to pick up the pace and started to show his class in the fight. So a good win for Scott Quigg, and he moves to 24-0 unbeaten. He's the British super bantamweight champion. So yep, that was the main domestic fight we had. Moving on to the then fight we had in Germany between cruiserweights, Juan Pablo Hernandez and Steve Cunningham from the USA. Hernandez, Cuban, fighting out of Germany, and this was for the IBF cruiserweight title, which Hernandez won off of Cunningham in the last fight, but due to the sort of controversial nature of the stoppage, the whole way the fight went, Hernandez was cut, and it was deemed for him to have won on points. And to take someone's title like that, the rematch was pretty much in order. So this was a rematch, a really good fight, to be honest with you. These guys are really closely matched. I think I saw that from the first fight. Skill wise, there's not too much to choose between them. I just think Hernandez's power told in both fights, and I think he's a little bit more accurate than Cunningham, if I'm being honest. I think his power and accuracy just had the slight edge and advantage. I think that Cunningham in this one was relying on Hernandez's lesser speed, if you like. I think Cunningham felt he was the faster guy. You hear shouts from the corner from Nazi Richardson saying, he's a heavyweight, he's slow. But to be honest, I didn't really see that. Cunningham seems to move quick, but when it comes to exchanges and punches, he wasn't really beating Hernandez to the punch. But he did make a really good fight of it. In the first fight, Cunningham got put down once in the first round, and then was coming back into the fight. So he sort of suffered an early scare, and then came back into the fight as it progressed. This was sort of a bit of a carbon copy, really, this fight. Cunningham was dodgy early, and he was down twice in round 4, and he really struggled. He was really hurt. He really struggled to get back up. especially from the first knockdown. He was really hurt and in big trouble. but he rallied and he showed a warrior mentality and spirit, and he came back. And then as the fight progressed, you could see Cunningham starting to come back into it, picking up rounds as the fight progressed and went on a bit. I think Hernandez perhaps was a bit tired as the fight went on, but I don't think he tired enough as much as Cunningham banked on him as tiring, and I think he still had power going into the later rounds. That Cunningham was just had to watch out for, basically. So all in all, I think it was quite a close fight actually, but I gave it to Hernandez, and it was given to Hernandez. He won the UD and keeps his title, his IBF Cruiserweight title. I would like to see a third fight. I think these guys are well matched, and I think they give exciting fights. And I'd like to see how Cunningham goes into a third fight, see what he's learned from these first two fights. I wouldn't mind seeing it. These two guys bringing some excitement into what I feel is a bit of a lackluster division. Bringing there's a good little rivalry going on there. So yeah, we'll see what comes of that if there's a third fight. Moving on. Just a quick mention, Vanez Martirosyan scored a TKO third round victory over Troy Lowry. I fully expected that, an early stoppage from him. He really needs to fight better opposition than this. I'm not going to blame him. I've heard that it's not necessarily his fault, but your guess is better than mine. Looking for Martirosyan to get bigger fights, now rather than later. He's too good to be fighting, this lower level. He's just, getting guys out of there early. He should be stepping it up a level now, and he needs that. Then we go on to, a big fight. Nonito Donaire. He got a split decision victory over Wilfredo Vasquez Jr. This was for the vacant WBO Super Bantamweight title, and I thought it was, it was a good fight. Somewhat a lackluster performance by Donaire. Having said that, he was up against a world-class opponent. Let's not kid ourselves. Vasquez Jr. is one of the top guys in the division. Before he got stopped late on by Jorge Arce, who is another, very strong fighter. Vasquez Jr. I thought he was an excellent prospect. And he still is. I think it's very difficult to fight against Donaire the way you want to fight the fight. Donaire often, forces you with his speed and ability, forces you to adjust. And I think Vasquez took a bit of time, but once he got into a rhythm and he kept a good defense going, he managed to score with that jab. He managed to fight a pretty solid fight. Obviously he was knocked down in the 9th. That's the first time Vasquez Jr.'s been down in his career, might I add. So it just goes to show Donaire's abilities, and there was a good knockdown, some good accurate punches there, finding the gaps. I think it was a tough fight for Donaire. We expect him to perform amazingly every fight, and I think it was a good performance. Okay, by his standards, maybe it was a little bit on the downside, and he was aware of that in his after fight interviews. But I will say he was up against a very good opponent. I expect good things still to come from Vasquez Jr., and I expect him to give other top guys in the division a run for their money. I expect him to still, be up there, giving these guys all they can handle, and looking for another title himself. Another thing was Donaire affected by the anger issue. He was angry. He said he wanted to hurt Vasquez Jr. And early in the fight, it looked like he was coming out with a bit of aggression. Sometimes that can throw your game off. It can stop you being as relaxed as you need to be to find those shots, those accurate shots. And I think particularly early on, Donaire was, sort of missing some shots which I normally think he normally scores. But yeah, I don't know what the judging was about. I mean, that judge who scored it for Vasquez Jr. 115 to 112. It's not right. He should be investigated. I mean, you can't just say it's okay. Donaire still won. It's not good enough. Okay. If he needs to be investigated, and if there's no obvious sort of corruption or malintention, then obviously it was a huge mistake. He's got it the wrong way round. That's too big a mistake. Everyone else watching the fight pretty much would call it for Donaire, and I called it for Donaire. And you guys, please, I ask you a question now. These judges, do they have to do do they have to go through some sort of license process to gain their judging license? Is there sort of a judging license, or do they just get, is it who they know and they just get given these jobs? Because otherwise he needs to be taken back, guys like this judge, and reschooled in the art of judging a boxing fight, a boxing match, because this can't go on. You know, that's a ridiculous score, 115 to 112 for Vasquez Jr. I just think it was the wrong way round, and even if it was a mistake on his part and he got it genuinely wrong, these judges need to be schooled. They need to be taken back and they need to reapply for licenses. You can't keep letting these guys judge fights. And finally, I'm gonna just go over briefly. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. retained his WBC middleweight title against Rubio, and he looked good. I think he dictated the pace of the fight to suit him. He fought very much an inside fight. I thought Marco Antonio Rubio should have tried to keep that jab pumping a bit more and tried to keep the fight on the outside more, because he was having some early success from the outside. He was just letting Chavez come on to the inside, and it just didn't work, and he was just getting outworked basically. I thought Chavez Jr. going forward, that's sort of a good fighting style for him to have. I just want to add, the reason I think a lot of these fighters who come forward like that, especially in the style that Chavez Jr. was using last night, when he's leaning up against you, the reason it's difficult to sort of hurt these guys, and they look like their chin is amazing, is because your punches are automatically forced to be shortened. So unless you're a superbly powerful puncher with short punches, and you have amazing power, it's going to be very difficult to hurt these guys. So Rubio, regardless of his KO percentage, doesn't really look like he's more of an accumulative puncher rather than a one-punch power puncher. And those short punches, when someone's so close to you, they're only short punches. When you have your jab out there and you're keeping them away from you, you get far more leverage on your punches, and that's how you hurt guys. So when Chavez Jr. is coming in, he's reducing the other guys' opportunities to get those powerful punches in, because he shortens the opponent's punches. The final thing I just want to say, it was reported a 20-pound increase in Chavez Jr.'s weight. He was really struggling to make weight, and he bloomed from what the fight was supposed to be in the late 150s up to like 181. I mean, should this really be allowed? I know Rubio went up by about 10 pounds as well, but I mean, should there be a limit on how much a fighter should come in above the weight? I mean, he's fighting up something like cruiserweight there for a middleweight title. Yeah, let's be honest with ourselves. Should that be allowed, especially from the champion, to come in that much over, 20 pounds over the weight, the belt you're fighting for? It can't be right, surely. Should we start introducing weigh-ins on the day and putting a limit on how much you can go over? I mean, even if it's something like 10 pounds, at least reduce it from something like this. I mean, 20 pounds over that limit is just, it defies belief to me. And anyway, something I want to finally touch on, because this video is getting quite long, is someone asked me a question the other day. Khan's Mystery Man, a guy here on YouTube, asked me a question, sent a message, and he mentioned corruption in boxing. And my answer basically with anything to do with corruption in boxing is we don't know. Obviously, we will never know how much corruption there is in this sport. And the way I look at it is, I follow this sport and I just hope for the best. That's all you can do. But I will say this: I feel that if us boxing fans knew the whole truth about corruption in boxing, I think it would sicken us. Thanks for watching.